there's been such a large focus outside of our country, when I think a much larger percentage is happening here in America, that the media just isn't giving attention to. So thank you.
Well, we also talked to, we were also talking in one of our previous episodes about how even the FBI, in terms of the resources that they devote to fighting, violent extremism, most of the resources tend to go towards, Islamic extremism, and it's not really, there's not much of a focus like there should be on white nationalism and extremism here in the country.
Yeah, I think the weight of that has shifted some because we have seen incredible increase of what seems to be racially motivated. It's a little more complicated than that, right? There are a lot of things that inform this kind of violence. But Christopher Wray, of course, very publicly, the director of the FBI, publicly clashed with the narrative of the former administration and congressional hearings, saying this is the most significant terrorist threat domestically by far. And of course, he's rather late to the game because people who were studying these things were noticing this already, and hopefully. Not that this is without its own set of issues. We'll have more of these law enforcement resources focusing on where the threat actually seems to lie.
Yeah, and we have a long-standing history of white nationalism in this country. In fact, our country was built on the idea of racial superiority, as you mentioned. The racial implications and a lot of the extremism, and we saw white nationalism as a particular form of white power activism in the United States emerged really kind of after World War II era. So, can you give our listeners a little bit of some historical background here with that?
Sure. Uh, you know, Elements that become modern white nationalism had existed before. For example, the Charles Lindbergh, uh, wanted to avoid World War II when it was part of the America First movement, in part because he didn't want to see Europeans killing each other again. He felt that the actual threat was the rising tide of color, to call upon an earlier work of white nationalist idealism. So the notions that inform pan-European white nationalism post World War II didn't necessarily get invented after World War II, but they come together in a particular way after the defeat of state-based fascisms in Germany and in Italy, and they come out of a lot of the ideas come out of the work of an American named Francis Parker Yockey, who is then championed later by people like Willis Carto and a person I wrote a lot about, Revelo Oliver, in rethinking exactly what the right wing in America should look like. So the things that primarily identify American white nationalism is, of course, pan-Europeanism, right? So their allegiance is not to the American government. As a matter of fact, they by and large view the American government as the enemy, and they view racial identity or white identity as the basic political motive and foundation of any state, and that's what they try to create. Now, how they understand that is different. And as that continues post World War II, leading off of Yockey, Oliver, and others, you get further developments of this. And of course, the latest mutation, if we can use that word, that people are probably most familiar with is in the context of the alt-right, and especially articulated by people like Richard Spencer.